کوچه رقصیدن، برای ترسیدن به وقت بوسیدن، برای خواهرم، خواهرت، خواهرامون، برای تغییر مغزها که پوسیدن، برای شرمندگی، برای بیپولی، برای حسرت یک زندگی معمولی، برای کودک زباله‌گرد و آرزوهاش، برای این اقتصاد دستوری، برای این هوای آلوده، برای ولیعصر و درختای فرسوده، برای پیروز و احتمال انقراضش، برای سگهای بیگناه ممنوعه، برای گریه های بیوقفه، برای تصویر تکرار این لحظه، برای چهره ای که میخنده، برای دانش آموزا، برای آینده، برای این بهشت اجباری، برای نخبه های زندانی، برای کودکان افغانی، برای این همه، برای غیر تکراری، برای این همه شعارهای تو خالی، برای آوار خونه های پوشالی، برای احساس آرامش، برای خورشید پس از شبای طولانی، برای غوصای اعصاب و بیخوابی، برای مرد میهن آبادی، برای دختری که آرزو داشت پسر بود، برای زن زندگی آزادی، برای آزادی، برای آزادی، برای آزادی. اینجا در و برات صاف میکنم، هرچی سرابر و پراب میکنم، بیا بری من از رومین و بمبش انزار میدوم جای کمرت شلاق میخورم بیا بری بعد ما بارون میباره از شازاری پر میشه این خونه از رقص و گل و شادی ما بریم تو سینه ها رگبار و آهن نیست دیگه هیچ خاکستری از جنس آدم نیست من بالا تو برات باز میکنم با تو تو تاریکی پرواز میکنم بیا بریم من چشماتو پر از خورشید میکنم گوشاتو پر از آواز میکنم بیا بریم بعد ما بارون میباره از شازاری پر میشه این خونه از رقص و گل و شادی ما بریم تو سینه ها رگبار و آهن نیست دیگه هیچ خاکستری از جنس آدم برای زن زندگی آزادی
Women's rights are human rights.
زن، المرأة،
حین جسه زندگی
vida,
جیب حیات سنی آزادی
الحرية,
گلیا
özgür,
بریوی
freedom.
It's gone very quiet, so we shouldn't start, I think. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Welcome to this event to mark the anniversary of the death of Mahsa Amini's murder in Iran by the morality police for daring to defy the strict dress code. This is one of many events happening all around the world to express outrage at what happened to her and what is happening to women globally. I'm Ingrid Leary, Labour MP for Tairi, and it is a privilege to MC this event, which is hosted by my good friend and colleague Camilla Bellich MP, who will do our closing remarks. So welcome to your Parliament, and remembering that this is a place where actually women couldn't convene here in Aotearoa. So it's really good to have you amongst us, and it's really good also to see our brothers here as well. To the men who are here, a very special welcome to you too. Before we start this event, due to risks posed by the Iranian regime to the diaspora, please know that the session will be recorded and photographed, especially during the question and answer. So if anyone wishes to avoid being filmed or in the photos, please approach any of the Iranian Solidarity Group members, recognisable with the beautiful heart-shaped brooches in the shape of the Iranian flag. They will help you steer clear, or you could choose to wear a mask, which they can provide. And I did see some of you taking photos as we came in, so please just be very careful. Maybe don't use them, maybe just keep your photos to the people on the stage if you're unsure. It is a real risk for people, and so we really want to honour and respect that. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we do the karakia. The exits are marked. If you hear any kind of alarm, please go to the exit and the security staff will tell you what to do. If there's an earthquake, please drop, cover and hold. And if anybody has a medical event, please just signal and we will support you and assist you. We have our own procedures here, so do not call 111. So we'll just bow our heads for the opening karakia, please. Ine hui nā mō mātou tinana, vināia hoki o mātou wairua, ki te tara o te ora ko ihi kraiti, tō mātou hui, whakahui, ake, amen. So before I introduce our facilitator for the evening, I'd like to thank the Iranian Solidarity Group New Zealand for their staunch advocacy over the last 24 months and for bringing us together this evening. What they have done and what we are doing tonight cannot bring back those who fought and died for our rights and the rights of women everywhere, for our dignity, for our self-determination. But in coming together, we can honour them and we can ensure that their fight was not in vain. So I'd like to acknowledge a few people here tonight. Firstly, my MP colleagues from across the House. Some people will come often at the dinner time, people come in dribs and drabs, others will go. That's the nature of our work, so please just let us do that, but know that we are joining in your cause. Also, members of the Iranian and Afghani communities, human rights defenders and media, and I put you at the top of the list because you have played such an important role in this kaupapa and in all our kaupapa around human rights. Also, diplomats, Wellington City councillors, honorary consuls, public sector officials, including people from MFAT, from the Human Rights Commission, Ministry for Women and others, the New Zealand Federation of Multicultural Councils, academics from Victoria University of Wellington, faith groups, people on Zoom, and also even Gissou, who's on Zoom in Washington at 2 a.m, so kia ora to you as well. So on the second anniversary of her death, we acknowledge Mahsa Amini and all the women who followed her and who continue to follow her, risking beatings, risking death and still even dying. Just this morning I emceed an event here at Parliament where the UNFPA presented their annual global report on women's sexual and reproductive health rights. It was a grim picture. Women's rights that had been advancing over the last 3 decades are eroding in many parts of the world, including in the Pacific. But nowhere, I think, is it more stark than in Iran and Afghanistan. I'd encourage everybody to read the UNFPA report, which discusses things like how women in Afghanistan are dying, giving birth at home if they don't have a male chaperone to take them to a medical centre during childbirth, or dying in custody for daring to leave the house and try to get to a medical centre while giving birth. In Iran, women life freedom was a movement that erupted after Mahsa Amini's death on September 16, 2022. It has emerged as a powerful response to systemic oppression and gender-based discrimination, gaining both national and international attention and underscoring the global significance of women's rights in Iran. Legal experts, advocates and human rights organisations are calling for institutionalised discrimination against women to be formally recognised as gender apartheid and as a crime against international law. And right now, as I speak, 2 years later, 34 Iranian women prisoners are on a hunger strike in Iran, and dozens are bravely flouting the hijab rule to mark the anniversary. Tonight, our incredible panellists will speak about the importance of formal recognition of gender apartheid. They'll describe the situation on the ground for women and girls in Iran and Afghanistan and outline a way forward towards greater equality and basic rights for all. Importantly, they will also tell us what we can do to help them. So before I introduce our facilitator for the evening, I'd just like the members of Parliament to stand up so I don't leave any of you out. If you can, wherever you are from across the House, I think I've got Labor and the Greens here. Thank you very much. These are the people you need to badger and continue to communicate with. So thank you for being here, colleagues. But now I'd like to introduce this evening's facilitator, Hanna Habibi, one of the founding members of the Iranian Solidarity Group New Zealand. She's a human rights advocate, and since the killing of Jina, Mahsa, Amini in September 22, she has been involved with over 40 protests and rallies in Wellington. That is such an inspiration to us. It is such an inspiration to have you here fighting the fight when we see the pictures of our sisters who have been beaten and died in their fight and their quest for freedom. And we know that those of you on stage joining us now put yourselves and your families and your connections in Iran in peril. So we are incredibly grateful to you, and please give a warm welcome to our facilitator now, to Hanna. Thank you.
Kia koutou, thank you so much, and thank you everyone for being here this evening on the second anniversary of Mahsa Amini's killing at the custody of the morality police in Iran. And also joining us in this very important panel discussion where legal experts and human rights activists from Iran and Afghanistan will walk us through what's taking place, what can be done, and how we can support women in Iran and Afghanistan and hopefully everywhere in the world. Before getting to the discussion, I just want to tell you a story. And by telling this story, I want to remind you and everyone that Mahsa Amini was not the first. And most probably she will not be the last if we do not change the system. This story is the story of Sahar Khodayari, also known as the Blue Girl. Sahar Khodayari was a 29-year-old Iranian, a simple girl, a huge, massive, passionate football fan. One of her dreams was to watch a football match live from stadium. Such a small dream, right? However, since 1979's Islamic Revolution in Iran, women are forbidden from watching men's football matches from stadiums, so they're not allowed to enter. Sahar, however, decided that she's going to try to make her dream to come true. She will dress like a man, and she will go to Tehran's Azadah Stadium to watch an international football match of her favorite team, Istiqlal, a very famous football club that plays in blue, hence her nickname, the Blue Girl. Her despise was an act of It was a despair and yet courageous attempt to basically try to experience something that she has been deprived alongside the other women in Iran. However, she was discovered, arrested, taken in custody, and despite the plea of her family and preparing the very heavy bail for such small act, she was sent to Evin prison, one of the most notorious prisons in Iran. She was kept there for 4 days and then was set free on bail to wait her trial later that year. Nobody knows what happened to her in those 4 days. She never talked about anything. However, she did tell her sisters that if they sentence her to jail, she will take her life away. According to her sisters, she returned a different person, broken, sunk in her depression. She wouldn't speak, she wouldn't eat properly, she would stay up all night, sleeping during the day, and when her sisters asked her to fix her system, she said, "I'm just staying up at night to cry because I don't want to hurt you anymore." On the day of her trial, in the courthouse, she figured out that she is going to be sentenced 6 months in prison. That was the last, that broke the leftover of her mental health. She went to the courtyard, she went in front of the courtyard and set herself on fire. She set herself on fire, they took her to hospital, but more than 90% of her body was severely burned. As simple as this, she lost her life for such a small dream. So this is the day in, day out life of Iranian women. When we talk about systematic gender segregation, we're talking about something very serious. Whether they're trying to get a divorce from their abusive husband because they can't divorce a man, so they should basically prove that they've been abused. Whether they're trying to or begging for seeing their children, that they lose their custody to their father or paternal grandparents after a divorce. Whether they're trying to leave the country and their husband doesn't allow them. Whether they're trying to dress in the way they like and they can't do that. Whether they want to watch a football match live. Day in, day out, they're fighting. And the situation for our Afghan sisters is way worse. The Taliban is trying to turn them into faceless, voiceless figures, eliminating them from the face of society altogether. If these are not gender apartheid, I don't know what is. I invite you all to join me and our panelists tonight to hear more, to learn more, and to find out what we can do. I'm going to introduce them, and after that, hopefully we start the discussion. Here we have two of our panelists joining us in person, and two of our panelists will join us online from Melbourne and Washington, D.C. Dr. Forough Amin, founder of Iranian Women in New Zealand, established the charity in 2020 to support and empower Farsi-speaking women in Aotearoa, New Zealand. With a PhD in language and communication from AUT and 11 years as a university lecturer in Iran, Forough's work is driven by her experience as a migrant woman and her advocacy for women's rights, particularly in the Muslim world. Since the start of the Women Life Freedom movement in Iran in 2022, she has actively supported the cause through rallies, lobbying, media engagement, and writing. We have Raihana Attaee with us. Raihana Attaee graduated from Kabul University's Faculty of Law in 2013 and was appointed as a judge in 2017. She initially worked in Herat province at the Court on Elimination of Violence Against Women for 3 years. In 2020, she became the first female judge in Nangarhar province, continuing her work at the Court of Elimination of Violence Against Women until August 2021. After the Taliban took over, Raihana and her family fled to Kabul and then escaped the country with help from the International Association of Women Judges, because as you can imagine, she sentenced a few of Taliban members. They resettled in Attaee, New Zealand in December 2021, where Raihana is now studying law at the University of Auckland. On the screen, we have our other two panelists. Azadah Mohammad is a legal advisor, Azadah on the top. She's a legal advisor at the Atlantic Council and a PhD candidate at the University of Melbourne. She holds 2 LLM degrees, one from the University of Essex and another from Ohio State University, where she was a Fulbright scholar. Azadah has extensive experience in human rights and humanitarian law, having worked closely with the Afghanistan Independent Human Rights Commission and served as a law lecturer at the American University of Afghanistan. In 2021, she co-founded the Hamdeli campaign, a collective dedicated to supporting at-risk individuals through advocacy and policy initiatives. And last, but certainly not least, we have Gissou Nia on the screen, the one bottom. Gissou Nia is the director of the strategic litigation project at the Atlantic Council, which addresses atrocity crimes, human rights violations, terrorism, and corruption globally. She's also on the board of the Iran Human Rights Documentation Center, where she helps develop and manage human rights advocacy and legal program aimed at promoting accountability and the rule of law in Iran. Gissou previously served as the center's executive director and as deputy director of the Center for Human Rights in Iran. She is also on the legal team for the End Gender Apartheid campaign. In the session, we will have around 45 minutes discussion, going to our panelists and talk about the circumstances in Iran and Afghanistan and the attempts and efforts to hold these two regimes accountable. And then by the end of the session, we'll have nearly 15 minutes for Q&A. So if you have any question, please write it down and hopefully we'll get to those. So I'm going to start with you, Forough John. You may hear me saying John, that means dear in Farsi. Difficult to ignore when we speak. For those of us who have less understanding of what it means when we say gender segregation, gender-based discrimination in Iran, can you list what basically it means, what's happening in law?
Sure. Thank you, Hanna. I think it's a very difficult question, actually, to answer in just a few minutes, but I'm trying to do my best. So it's a very long list of all the abuses and discrimination that women face in Iran. But let me start by referring to a statement made by Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of the regime. Once he said that gender equality is one of the biggest mistakes of the Western thought. I think this sentence on its own can tell us a lot about the status of women's rights in the country. So there are some most widely known breaches of women's rights in the country that you may be familiar with, like women cannot stand for positions like being the president of the country or becoming a judge, or a woman's testimony the value of a woman's testimony is half of a man. And even in some cases, like murder, even the testimony of a woman is not accepted. So these are some of the famous things that we know, but they are only the tip of the iceberg. If we go into details, there are absolute breaches of human rights when it comes to women. There are gross injustices that women face. Let's start by the age of the criminal responsibility. In Iran, the girls, when they reach the age of 9, they are considered as adults because the age of criminal responsibility is 9-year-old. So a girl as young as 9-year-old can be punished for any crime that she has done. So that's one of the simplest things that you can see in the country. Or the differences in the punishment that women and men can have for committing the same crime. Just imagine a man walks into his house and see that his wife is committing adultery with a man. He can easily kill, murder both of them without any criminal liability. Because in the regular proceedings, what happens is that if you kill someone, according to the law in Iran, you will be executed. So that means retaliation in kind. But there is not such a punishment if you kill your wife doing, for example, committing adultery. Or the fact that fathers or grandfathers can easily kill their children, daughter or son, again, without any retaliation in kind. They may just be sentenced to 3 to 10 years jail. And this is, I think, one of the main drivers of honor killing in the country, because fathers can kill without, with impunity. And then one of the absurd ones is the blood money that is given to someone who are being dead or injured for any reason. So if 2 women are killed, the value, the money that is paid to their families equals to a man losing his testicles. So the value of a man's testicles equals 2 women being killed. And, when you go to the personal status law, for example, the family law, man is considered, the husband is considered as the authority of the household. And it gives him the permission to control lots of things related to women, like their movement, whether they can leave the house, whether they can study or not, they can work or not, and they have the authority or guardianship of the children as well. So basically, you as a mother has no guardianship over your children. You can only have the physical custody, and you will lose this physical custody if you get divorced. A mom can have the custody of the children until the age of, I think, 2 for sons and 7 for daughters. And if she decides to remarry, she will even lose these breadcrumbs of rights that the law is giving to her. And if a woman wants to get divorced, for example, because again, men are the ones who have the right to divorce their wives. But for women, there are only few cases that they can apply for getting divorced, like severe addiction of the husband or long imprisonment. And in case of domestic violence, you can only apply for divorce if you can prove that your husband has beaten you to the extent that you cannot bear it anymore. So that's fine to be beaten by your husband, but as long as you can keep going, unless you can prove that, it's unbearable for you. And finally, maybe we can talk about child marriage. So it seems, the law says that age 13 is the minimum age for a girl when she can get married. But the reality is that a girl only needs father's permission for getting married. So a father can marry off his daughter at any age without. It will be something legal. So that's the only thing that a girl needs to get married. And it has caused around 40,000 of child marriage each year in the country. So the list goes on and on. I think I should stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I absolutely. This is horrendous. This is beyond understanding how, and what it's done in Iran is like hidden. They try to include the law in different subsections, hide it somewhere that they can reach it out, and they can hold women basically by their hair at any point they want. And it's so difficult. You talk to people, they say, oh, look at them, they're so fashionable in the streets. And then at that point, you really don't know what to say. You lived in Iran. What's living? I've lived there, but I want you to just tell us, what does it mean living under, how does it grow under your skin?
Yeah, I think living in Iran means constantly being abused by the regime, facing discrimination and aggression by the regime, from being denied access to public services if you are not obeying the dress code, for example, not being able to go into the airport, boarding your plane or going to university only because you are not wearing the hijab the way that the government wanted, to interrogation, imprisonment, and murder, as we saw in case of Mahsa, Jina, Amini. But one such experience that has stayed with me happened about 7 years ago. So 7 years ago, when I went to Iran to visit my family, it was on the second day of my arrival. I was in Tehran staying with my sister. And on that day, I went to the university to do some job-related work. So as Hanna introduced me, I used to work at the university as a lecturer for 11 years there. So I went to this university, and so I was wearing my clothes according to the law, because I was going to university. When I was returning from university, I went to the metro station to get the train and go to my sister's place. When I arrived there, I saw that there was this morality police van at the entrance of the metro station. And they were forcing girls to go to the van. So firstly, I just wanted to pass by. I was in a hurry, I was still jet lagged, and I was excited to go to my sister's place and to be with her. But I couldn't refuse, to not say anything. So I just went back to them, turned to them, and asked one of these morality women there, that why are you taking these girls? They haven't done anything wrong. And she replied with the familiar aggressive tone that they have. This is none of your business, just leave and go. So I refused. I insisted, just to let these girls go. And then the other woman came and told me, if you don't leave, we will put you in the van with the other girls. And before I know, I was in the van. So I don't know what happened, but I was there in the van, and I was confused and terrified. So these girls were all in the van. They were crying, begging to let go. I have exam today. I have to go to work. And thousands of thoughts were just marching in my mind. I wanted to go on a trip with my sister the next day, and I didn't just want to ruin everything. And I was thinking of all the consequences for me as a university lecturer. What's going to happen to me if they take me to the jail? And I don't know how I got the courage. So in an instant, I opened the van's door, and I just jumped out of the moving van. So I was lucky because the streets around this metro station was very crowded by people and cars around there. So I just jumped out, and somebody from behind held my scarf that was wrapped around my neck and tried to pull me back. But because the van was moving, he couldn't. So I just fell on the street, and then I went to the other side of the street. I leaned against the wall and started crying and crying for a while. So I was just feeling shaken by this experience. And I was 36 years old at that time. I was a mature woman. I was a university lecturer living abroad. And that's how I was, shaken, impacted by this experience. Just imagine a 22-year-old girl from a small town coming to the capital city, and she was taken to the detention center. I spent only 5 minutes in that van, and that was the experience I had. And this girl was taken to the detention center. And this experience, I think by no means it is something unique. That's the daily experience of thousands of women. All of us here, I think, we all have some similar experiences of these things. And this is from a system that has been designed to oppress women in every possible way. Yeah.
I'm really sorry for what you experienced, and my heart's been aching for more than 2 years constantly for our girls back in Iran who are experiencing this on a daily basis, as you said, from all ages. The videos come out where a mother is trying to stop a van because her daughter is in the van, where somebody just is fighting the same way that you ran away and they hold her by her hair, by her scarf. This is horrendous. I don't know. We think things are bad in Iran. I don't dare to go to the next question to Raihana, because now I just want to know what's happening under the Taliban in Afghanistan. Raihana Jan, can you walk us through the discrimination against women in Afghanistan?
Thank you, Hanna John, for the question. To answer it, I have to clarify two separate points. One, the protective rules and laws that Afghanistan had before Taliban came to power, and all of them have been removed by the Taliban. And the second point is the new restrictive rules that Taliban put on place towards of the situation. About the first point, during the past 20 years, Afghanistan government had signed too many international humanitarian laws. For example, the Declaration on Women's Rights, Human Rights, Child Rights, and many other humanitarian laws. But the Taliban do not feel any responsibility about any of those commitments. Secondly, Afghanistan government had amended many old laws to align them with humanitarian laws. For example, the Afghanistan Criminal Code was hugely amended, but the Taliban reversed all those amendments. And also, the Afghanistan government passed many humanitarian laws to protect women and minorities. For example, one of those laws was the law on elimination of violence against women. That law simply recognized all humanitarian rights for women and criminalized the prohibition of those rights. For example, the prohibition to right to education or work or forced marriage or underage marriage, or preventing a woman from enjoying financial rights. All of them was a crime under that statute. But the Taliban, just by switching on power, removed that law and also the court that was responsible for applying that law. It means they practically left women without legal protection and without any access to justice. About the new restrictive laws that they put on place, when they first came to power, for some days they left the school doors open to girls, and also university was open for some days. That gave a fake picture of the Taliban to the world, and some people thought that Taliban really changed positively. But after some days, they closed the universities, they closed the schools for the girls above 12 years old. Now you can't see any single girl in the universities and any girls above 12 at schools. And it practically left 2.7 million girls out of education, according to UN. And also, they announced that women cannot work to justice sector anymore. Women cannot go to public parks. Women, they closed the beauty shops. and many these type of restrictions. On that time, Afghanistan women, despite all the challenges, all the security issues, they come to the streets, they protested for their rights, but the Taliban arrested them, they put them in jails, they raped them. There is a lot of interviews from those women after they come out of those jails, and many different tortures, and they after that couldn't protest on the streets. To entrench all of these restrictions, the Taliban just announced or released their new morality law, and that morality law has 35 articles, and in each of those articles they remove human rights and women's rights. For example, in Article 13 they say that women's face and women's voice, they are private. It means you have to cover all your body, including your face, when you are out of home. And your voice is private. It means you cannot speak loudly on the public as a woman. Also in this article they say that Muslim women should not show their face to the non-Muslim women. Before that I didn't face and see that type of restriction. Even in books I didn't read that, but I don't know where the Taliban bring these rules that women cannot even show their face to women. In Article 20, they restrict public transport riders to not give right to those women who are not covered their face or have not any man with them. And in Article 24, they give a wide discretion for their morality police. That based on that article, their morality police can lash women on the street, they can arrest them, they can imprison them without no legal process. And it's all scary. The aim for why the Taliban does this to women, it's clear. They know that if women are not educated, if they have no work, then they are highly dependent to men, and in that case they can easily exploit women as slaves inside their houses.
This is worse than slavery. At least they could speak. I mean, we have recently, we all have learned about at least the last addition to what already was unbearable. It's just not, to me, I can't even get my head around that. But this is the second time they're in power. And I know that the first time they were in power, you were a young girl in Afghanistan. The reason I'm asking these questions is that we hear about what's in law, but we really need to also feel what women feel in these countries. And I want to ask you, what was it? What do you remember from their first turn? We just want to feel what young girls right now in Afghanistan feel.
When people talk about the first time that the Taliban ruled Afghanistan, only one image came to my mind. That is that I was around 10 or 11 years old on that time. And I couldn't go to school. I was not allowed to go to school. I could see boys going to school daily. I lived in a small village, but I, as a girl, and other girls couldn't go. And I kept asking my dad why I can't go to school. And my dad kept telling me one day you could go, but just be passionate. And I remember some days I went to a top of a hill near my house and kept looking to the school for the boys and just imagine what they are doing here and how it looked like to be a student. And now I feel for those girls who are halfway in their school, at universities, how troubled they feel when they banned from going and continuing their education. Because once you are prohibited from using your right, all your focus, all your attention come to that point, and you cannot enjoy the rest of your life. And that's how now the situation for girls in Afghanistan.
Yeah, we can feel, at least we can try to feel what they might be feeling, and there is no accountability whatsoever inside the borders of those countries for people who are ruling. Nothing. They have full authority. They do whatever they want to do, and there's absolutely nothing domestically. And they're brutal, and that's why we need to encourage the international community to do something. That is why we're here. That is why we really need to learn and educate ourselves what can be done and do everything in our power. Think of all those little girls. We really need to think of them. And the pain, it's unbearable. And on that note, I want to get to our online panelists, our legal experts. I'm going to ask you, Azadah, start with you. As a legal expert, why, I mean, we hear this, sometimes this comment that gender discrimination happens everywhere, right? Why the gender-based discrimination in Iran and Afghanistan should be realized as gender apartheid?
Thank you very much, Hanna. I assume my voice is fine. Good evening, good morning, good evening, good morning to you, Gissou Nia, Excellencies. I'm very pleased to speak with you all today. If possible, Hanna, could I have your Zoom muted because I hear myself back?
Clearer now?
Should be fine. I can hear myself back. If I have your Zoom muted, that'll be great, but I can start. It's okay. I think it should be fine. So as my two other colleagues mentioned, Raihana and Dr. Forough mentioned that the Taliban's and the Islamic Republic's institutionalized gender-based discrimination and the level, the extent of that discrimination, we believe that amounts to gender persecution of gender apartheid. The Taliban's ever-deepening situation of oppression of women and girls is unparalleled in the world. This has been repeatedly said by a lot of international actors at the UN and also international organizations. The Taliban has created a system of governance, and also the Islamic Republic, as it was explained by Dr. Forough, that is deliberately built to systematically oppress and subjugate the women of Afghanistan and women in Iran. Specifically about the Taliban, since the August 2021, the Taliban has issued an estimated 150 decrees and edicts, and more than 80 of them are specifically targeting women and girls, and all of them are banning or severely restricting them from accessing their most fundamental rights. For example, as Raihana also mentioned, the Taliban has institutionally subjugated and dominated women's rights through discriminatory laws and policies, and a dreadful enforcement method that has established an institutionalized framework of gender apartheid. In both of these situations, also the Islamic Republic and the Taliban-controlled Afghanistan, they have Ministry of Vice and Virtue, as it was explained by my colleagues, and a morality police, which has been arbitrarily arresting and torturing women for exercising their most basic rights, as it was also indicated in the example that you, Hanna, provided. Preventing women in Afghanistan from right to work, study, movement, and dress code in both of these situations. Both of these two systems have draconian laws. For example, the Taliban has reintroduced stoning to death, public lashing and flogging, and the same laws are practiced under the Islamic Republic regime in Iran, as Dr. Forough mentioned. So this is actually creating a clear example of how apartheid system worked in South Africa. As we understand that the draconian intention of an apartheid system is to maintain an institutionalized regime of systematic oppression and domination, where the underclass is subjugated for the dominant group is benefiting the survival, dehumanized and cut off from the resources, access to the needed overcome their group fit operation. Therefore, the criminalization of gender apartheid will fill the current accountability vacuum under international law that leaves many of these victim survivors without any remedies or reparation. As you mentioned, Hanna, that both of these systems has been committing these systematic oppression, institutionalized gender-based persecution and apartheid without any accountability. It will also ensure that the gender-inclusive approach that better reflects the realities in the context such as the Taliban-controlled Afghanistan and also in Iran. Gender apartheid or gender apartheid system, or recognizing these two situations as a gender apartheid system and codifying these situations as a gender apartheid crime, could also strengthen the normative framework of international law and oblige states to take action and effective measures to prevent and punish the act. It will not allow the international community to normalize its relationship with the apartheid states, such as in the case of Taliban and Iran. For example, right now we are very much concerned about our embassies being closed down in the Western countries, and also the normalization of the international community with the Taliban regime. For example, now we have over 3 years of Taliban control Afghanistan. Taliban has returned back to Afghanistan in August of 2021, as Raihana mentioned, but the international community has not yet has not engaged with the government in a more meaningful way. At the same time that Afghanistan is going through one of the world's worst humanitarian crises and a grave human rights violation by the Taliban. So with all these examples that my two colleagues mentioned, by these laws and these ministries that they have mentioned and their morality police, this actually puts in a very appropriate position to call that these two systems is a very clear example of what a gender apartheid system would work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, exactly, because this is systematic. This is something that the law and the systems are targeting women, to segregating them in favor of men, making them second-class citizen, or even worse than that. Do we know when the term shaped? This is a great term to describe the situation. Is it something that we recently came up with, or it has a little bit of history into it?
Very good question, Hanna Jan. Again, the Taliban controlled Afghanistan, as it was mentioned by Raihana Jan, from 1996. They took the control of Afghanistan. So they appeared in 1994, and they joined forces with Al Qaeda, which is the international terrorist organization. And very quickly, they managed to take the control of Kabul, the capital of Afghanistan. By 1996, they managed to unfortunately control over 95% of the country. So they introduced similar draconian laws, similar draconian measures on gender-based persecution and in gender apartheid system in the country. So for the first time, the women of Afghanistan referred to their situation as under the Taliban as gender apartheid was in the late 1990s. So during that time, the Taliban has imposed very similar measures against women, banning women from going to school, universities, work, leaving the house without a male chaperone or mahram, as they called, and that mahram or male chaperone is unfortunately limited to only 3 male relatives, which could be your husband, your brother, or your son after the age of 18. But most people, the history of Afghanistan protracted conflicts. Most of the women right now in Afghanistan do not have this male chaperone to actually go out with them or depend on them. And then women were also banned from public participation, similar to the situation that we are right now, and accessing healthcare and justice. As it was also mentioned in the opening remarks, that Afghanistan during the late 90s was going through one of the worst humanitarian crises as well, and we had the female mortality rate at the birth was one of the worst in the world as well. I think we were number 2 in the world, but as Raihana mentioned, that in the past 20 years we had worked on that and we were in a better position, but we are fair that we go back to that situation. So one of the prominent Afghan human rights defender, the late Sima Wali, who has passed a few years ago, was among the first Afghan women to call for recognition of gender apartheid, explaining that the extent of the grave human rights violation and women's rights violation by the Taliban could only be explained under an exclusive term of gender apartheid. She believed that gender apartheid or the apartheid system is a very inclusive term, and it can actually encompass all the acts that are being imposed by the Taliban then. So the impact of Taliban's gender apartheid was so severe in the late 90s and during that time that they were in power, that after the Taliban's overthrow in 2001, Afghanistan lacked female professionals, like particularly in healthcare, education, service industries, and other professional areas. And the female literacy rate in the late 90s, in the beginning of the century in 2001, was less than 5% in the whole country. Raihana's example was one of clear cut, and that a female was not allowed to go to school, and that has a very harmful impact in the years that leaded after the overthrow of Taliban from the power. So as Raihana also mentioned, between 2001 and 2021, a period of 20 years, we had a little bit time. Despite a lot of challenges, the women of Afghanistan made gradual progress through realizing their human rights. In 2020, just a year before the Taliban's violent takeover of Afghanistan, the female literacy was reported at 30%, with 3 million girls attending school. And also at this time, we had 35% of public school teachers were reported as being women, and as well as 25% of government employees, 12% of judges, and 10% of attorneys. I remember working in this sector and access to justice sector with justice institutions. One of the main aim was to provide a lot of incentives for females to be joining the workforces and in the professional capacity. And I believe Raihana's joining the being a judge was one of these programs that actually encouraged women to take part. So looking with the Taliban back into power for like 3 years now and reinstalling their gender apartheid system, I often worry how would the future of Afghanistan would look like in a world after the Taliban. We are really hopeful that Taliban will not be here for long, and the international community's silence in the face of such atrocities. We believe that this is a complicit into the Taliban to continue their system of gender apartheid for the second time with such a ferocity and impunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Azadah. Yeah, absolutely. This is the best term to describe the situation. Well, Gissou Jan, I'm so sorry for keeping you waiting, but we're hoping you tell us what to do. You are on the legal team for the End Gender Apartheid campaign. Can you tell us about the campaign and what it aims to achieve?
Absolutely. And thank you for having me, and thank you to the organizers. Sorry that my voice is a bit gone. It's an early hour here in Washington, D.C. So in terms of what Azadah touched on, it's very true that this this concept has been discussed for a long time. Unfortunately, as long as the situation has existed, there has been reference to gender apartheid, apartheid jinsiati, in Dari or Persian. And what the End Gender Apartheid campaign seeks to do, and what many other efforts that have proliferated in recent months seeks to do, is to actually codify this as a crime under international law. So up until now, there have been many Afghan women's rights defenders and Iranian women's rights defenders calling the situations in their countries what it is. But the term has largely been descriptive in many ways, because this is not currently a crime that is codified under international law. Certainly, aspects of the crime are already criminalized. We have gender persecution as a crime against humanity. We know that Afghanistan is a member state of the International Criminal Court, and gender persecution is a crime against humanity as part of the Rome Statute. But we don't have a crime recognizing the full totality of the system that these women are living under. Part of the crime of apartheid, as was described, is a regime seeking to entrench its power through the subjugation and segregation of a class of persons. And so the current definition of apartheid, which was born out of the experience of South Africa, where, of course, many in the room will know white South Africans, black South Africans, and non-white South Africans. That system, basically, the apartheid was defined out of that situation and that system, but currently it only applies to race. So part of what the End Gender Apartheid campaign is seeking to do, and what other many efforts that are coming to the fore now are seeking to do, is to actually codify the crime. The area that Azadah and our other colleagues and myself are specifically working on is trying to include gender in the crime of apartheid as a crime against humanity that is currently under consideration in the Crimes Against Humanity draft treaty. And that treaty, there will be a resumed session of the Sixth Committee, or the Legal Committee at the United Nations, there'll be a resumed session of that committee on October 10th, and there will be a decision about whether or not that treaty should move to negotiations. So there's been many years that the contents of the treaty have been debated, the modalities, whether the committee will move forward with it or not. That will come to a conclusion on October 10th on whether or not it will move to negotiations. If that treaty, which covers many different crimes, goes to negotiations, then there will be a period in which we can, all the interested civil society actors and also interested states, of which there are several, can push for gender to be part of the definition of apartheid in that treaty. And so that's what we're really hoping to see, because although it sounds like it will take a long time, because it would still be several years until that treaty would ultimately be adopted, in legal terms, that's very fast. Nothing ever really goes that fast in the law. And so getting this crime into a treaty that hasn't been adopted yet, for us, seems to be the most efficient pathway to codify this crime. So the End Gender Apartheid campaign is trying to raise awareness, first and foremost, about what gender apartheid is, how it affects women and girls in Afghanistan and Iran. And then there is this codification component, which we view as important because I think it gives the necessary weight to this crime. And also, we need to properly define this crime for us and the international community to be able to formulate appropriate policy responses, legal responses, and really grapple with this politically and on different levels.
Thank you very much for explaining that, and thank you very much for the attempt. It is very important to raise awareness, but since it's been quite a while that the term apparently is being used in the recent years more frequently. What will we achieve? Let's say that we pass that due process and we get gender apartheid codified and as a crime against humanity. What can happen next? What does that enable?
Just real quick, and was that question to me?
Yes, Gissou Jan, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. No worries. Just didn't want to speak over Azadah if the question is to her. So just to touch on a few things real quickly, this is a question that we get a lot, and it's an important question. Our view is that this campaign is not only centered around codification of the crime. What we ultimately want is for the regimes that are engaging in the crime of gender apartheid to stop the practice. First and foremost, we want to make sure that no women and girls continue to be harmed under these very corrosive policies. And so as part of discussing what the crime is and making sure that governments are aware of that crime, there's a journey that's happening along the way where, as probably a lot of people have noticed, the term is becoming much more well-known. So although a lot of people knew what the term gender apartheid was, who follow Persian language social media, because they would see Afghan and Iranian women using it, and a broader segment of people using it, the term wasn't as popularized in the English language or in French or in Spanish. And we now see that a lot of global languages and global media around the world are talking about what this is. And unfortunately, it is partly because of a perfect storm of factors. One, the situation that we've already acknowledged here, which is the incredibly corrosive situation in Afghanistan under the Taliban, the fact that there are these successive decrees and there are these very draconian awareness of the woman life freedom movement in Iran and a spotlight on those issues. So I think it is the convergence of these factors that's leading to a moment where there's more discussion of the recognition of what this crime is. If the crime is ultimately codified, there are some important things that will result. One is that there will be obligations for other states to ensure that they are not complicit in or aiding and abetting the practice of gender apartheid and the commission and perpetration of that crime. And so that's one really important thing that we hope to see out of the Crimes Against Humanity Treaty ultimately being adopted. And so that's really, I think, one of the main things that we're looking to, I would say. The other thing that I would note is that we hope that New Zealand, since this is being addressed to a group of decision makers in New Zealand, we hope that New Zealand, following its longstanding feminist foreign policy and the role that it's played on the global stage on many of these issues, will be one of the countries that will signal support for gender apartheid to be included in the Crimes Against Humanity draft treaty. There is a cross-regional group of states who have already signaled their support at the 6 committee sessions. That includes countries like Chile, Mexico, Brazil, the Philippines, Australia, Austria, Iceland. So we're hoping that New Zealand adds their name to that list and signals that strong support.
Thank you very much. That is certainly our hope and perhaps the main goal of this event. New Zealand played a critical role to exclude Iran from the UN's Women Convention, and now it was surprising to me that New Zealand has not signaled its support already. So maybe that's something that you can help us with. Just to close my questions, Gissou John, I'm coming back to you. If you were to draw a roadmap for us as activists, for authorities, for lawmakers to support the End Gender Apartheid campaign from here to the point that we see it meeting its goal, what would you recommend for us to do? Because that will be most important takeaway from this session for myself and many other activists and authorities here.
The End Gender Apartheid campaign, a lot of assets and information is available at endgenderapartheid.today. It's a website, lots of open assets. It's organizationally unbranded. There is no one organization that owns the work. The idea is just that anybody who's concerned with this issue can read up on what it is that the effort is requesting and can go ahead and advocate with their governments, can advocate with the media. And we see that a lot of people are doing that. We do get inquiries on our info line from people who are engaging with decision makers in Ireland, Denmark, countries around the world. What I would say is that we're hopefully on the African continent. So Azadah just recently traveled to South Africa, for instance, to be able to deliver this message in the country where the crime of apartheid was defined and where our greatest champions against the crime of apartheid really are. And I went to Latin America at the end of February, early March, to speak to countries with feminist foreign policy and to get them to be engaged around this. So I would say that if you are an activist, if you are a journalist, if you are an artist, there is a role for you to play, because women's rights are human rights and all our rights. And of course, this applies to men as well. One important thing to note about the crime of gender apartheid is the victims are not only women. People who can have the crime of gender apartheid perpetrated against them can also be men, if they, or, non-binary individuals or so on, people who somehow are defying the strict binary that the regime is setting for people, right? So anybody who's in defiance of those gender norms can be a victim of a gender apartheid regime. And so we're really all in this fight together. And I would just encourage folks to visit the website, also visit our social media. We have a pretty robust Instagram page that will regularly give updates on what members of the broader community are doing, where they're traveling, where they're speaking, and also, of course, updates on the laws in Afghanistan and Iran and latest developments. But if you're an artist, tell the story through your art. If you are a journalist, tell the story through your pen. And if you're an activist, there are many meetings that you can take with officials to let them know that you care about this concept and that you want them to codify the crime.
Thank you very much, Gissou John. Any request we can have from our government here? Gissou Jan, the question was to you, sorry. What can our government do?
Plenty of requests. I'm sure Azadah also has some ideas. But our main request right now is that New Zealand, as you noted, Hanna, New Zealand was one of the strongest champions of the move to remove the Islamic Republic from the UN Commission on the Status of Women, which was unprecedented because that had never happened before with the CSW, and Jacinda Ardern had played a really strong leadership role there. Following that good pattern, we would love if New Zealand's foreign ministry took an official position on codifying the crime of gender apartheid, signals its support through its legal advisors in New York at the United Nations that they wish for this crime to be included in the Crimes Against Humanity draft treaty. Folks in New Zealand can do that in different ways. The foreign ministry or the foreign minister can make a statement. The head of state can make a statement signaling support. That would obviously be at the highest levels. Parliamentarians can pass resolutions and make statements in support of this. And the media in New Zealand and cultural figures can also come out in support of this. So the broad push is for codification of this crime, which can happen in different ways, but the very tactical approach that the New Zealand government can play right now is to support with its words or in making statements and in different UN forums around how it is supportive of gender apartheid being included in the Crimes Against Humanity draft treaty.
Thank you very much for guiding us. That is certainly our demand as well, and our hope to see New Zealand actively support Iranian women and Afghan women, because the situation is absolutely unbelievable and unbearable for women in Iran and Afghanistan. I wish I had more time and we had more time to ask more questions, but I think our panelists covered quite a bit of what's taking place, how it's affecting people, and what actually can be done. So the goal is to codify gender apartheid. And that is what we all need to work towards. Thank you very much for listening to us. Thank you very much for your support by being here, by those who joined us online, and thanks to our MPs for supporting us and having us here. Thank you very much. Please join me. Thanks. Sorry, I just was reminded about the online Q&A. And if we have any question here, that would be, this is time. I can't see any question online yet. I hope that I have everything, but any question from the audience? My husband.
Thank you very much. So this might sound a bit cynical, but I feel like for Western governments, they would be interested in doing something if their interests were affected. Obviously, there's always, we'd love for them to have an ethical stance, a purely ethical stance. But admittedly, there's also very little that they can do, right, with respect to violations that are not happening on their soil to begin with. So I kind of found it interesting to actually just focus on what can be happened from this side. What about actually Iranian and Afghan women in their own countries? How can they be empowered? I was reading the other day that in the earthquake that hit Herat last year, 90% of the victims were actually women because they couldn't leave home because it hit in the morning and their husbands were at work. So can you think of any, do you have any ideas for maybe like civil resistance, peaceful resistance that can help empower people on the ground?
Thank you very much for that very important question. And Azadah Jan, I think maybe you are the right person to help us here, or Raihana Jan, I'm not sure. Do you want to?
About practical support of Afghan women, I think anyone can support in that hard situation Afghan women, like by raising awareness about the situation, by asking the governments not to recognize the Taliban, and specifically what New Zealand can do, New Zealand government, I think there's a lot of space for that to support women, like supporting online education, at least for those who can study online, supervising the international humanitarian aids not go to the Taliban and go to people of Afghanistan. There is girls who who forced to leave their education halfway. If New Zealand government can issue student visas, at least for those who can complete their studies and get their degrees. And there is a lot of human rights activists stuck in Afghanistan for these 3 years. And a lot of women worked with the previous government as part of army and soldiers, and they have no security there, but they are stuck and they have no way out. If New Zealand government can open its quota to those people who are at real risk, it is all practical ways that can support Afghanistan women.
If I can add to that, because I think the question that you asked, maybe it was mainly about what women themselves can do in their own country. So if I can talk about women of Iran, I think they are already doing what they need to do. So as one of the most well-known Iranian journalists once said, Mahsa, she said that we are not asking Western countries or foreign countries to come and save us. We are just asking them, please do not save this regime when we are trying to topple them down. You know, if you look at Iranian women, what you see is that they are already, fashionable women, very brave, taking off the scarf, going to the streets. And that's the most, I can say, the highly priced that they pay, on a daily basis, because you can take your scarf and go to the streets. And maybe, you are safe for the first 10 days, but nobody knows what's going to happen to you next day. So I think, I understand that the foreign countries cannot come and save, other people from their regime, and the real change comes from within the country. But the main issue is that the foreign countries are not ready to see the change because of all these, interests that they have in the region. So that's, I think, the main thing that we are asking other countries to do.
And I just want to add one point, especially in Afghanistan. I think the danger is so grave. It's unbelievable what danger they face. So any sort of domestic civil resistance inside Afghanistan, especially led by women, is I don't know what will they face. They could disappear. They could face any sort of torture, punishment, whatever. So that is mainly why that we think they really need what they need the most is for like Afghans in other countries and international community to stand to stand in solidarity with them, support them through whatever they can do, because at least in Iran, there is a little bit more freedom of civil resistance, and as Forough said, they are doing everything they can. Civil resistance is taking place at every step, and from the perspective for Iran, raising awareness, the world knowing what's happening and doing everything for them meant quite a lot in the previous few uprisings in Iran. But in Afghanistan, I think the situation is different, and it's very dangerous for them to do anything. I have a few questions online. I apologize. I'll read one. One of them is referring to the boycott of South Africa's rugby team and the role it played in 70s and 80s. And they are asking, how does the panel feel about using boycott to counter the Taliban's sport washing with its men's cricket team. Azadah, do you want to take this one?
Yes, absolutely, Hanna. I think that's extremely helpful to do that. One of the measures that the international community in New Zealand can take. I think it was last year that Australia also boycotted the Afghanistan's cricket team, which unfortunately we see that they're increasingly in support of the Taliban regime. And then Australian Cricket Board decided not to play with them. And then we have seen the image of these cricket players, although it's a national game, coming from Afghanistan, that they're sitting with the Taliban leadership. They're sitting with some senior figures within the Taliban leadership. So refusing to play with such a team that is actually in support of the regime like the Taliban is extremely helpful, and that's also kind of resulting in non-recognition or supporting and standing with solidarity with the people of Afghanistan. We hear that very soon the Afghanistan's or the Taliban-backed cricket team of Afghanistan will play in a number of countries, including in South Africa. And we really hope that such measures are taken against them. So this is a way of non-recognition and also solidarity. Another point I just quickly wanted to add in the points about what can be done. As you said, that while we have a little bit space in Iran for civil disobedience, in Afghanistan that space is also taken from us. The situation is so bad in Afghanistan that while I was traveling to South Africa, meeting with different human rights advocates, jurists and lawyers and advocates, there was professors, they were saying that we had a little space within ourselves to come together, to congregate and to talk about what to do and how to actually approach this issue. But the women in Afghanistan do not have such spaces as well. So we are confined within our homes, and even the beauty salons, why they actually had to close down females beauty salons, because that was also kind of income generation for these women, because women, a lot of them who organized these protests against the Taliban, they would come together in these beauty salons to plan these protests, and that's why they had to even close down them for women not to even congregate. So I think keeping our embassies closed, engagement very closely with the people of Afghanistan through these embassies, and also then at the international community level, and also any measures possible, is extremely helpful with us at this moment.
Thank you. The next question is, maybe I come to the audience first, then I go back to the online questions. Yes.
Thank you. Kia koto. Just a fact that's coming out of Iraq recently, which I feel is going backwards at the moment. So there's a new bill that's gone through its first reading and it's passed. And what that bill will essentially do, it will make an amendment to the Personal Status Law and Amendments 1959, which is also called the Law 188, which will essentially allow marriages for girls that are as young as 9 years old. But it will also take away the right for monetary compensation for divorced women in Iraq simply by the man, saying whatever they want to say. So from a legal standpoint, I guess my question is, what legal strategies that have been proven to make positive change to reverse these laws or challenge them internationally or domestically?
Thank you very much. Gissou, do you want to take this question, perhaps?
Yeah. So in terms of reverse, what can happen to actually stop the progression of these laws? Because I think there's a question over, how low can things go, and ultimately what's actually going to do to change decision makers inside the country and to get them to go into a different direction. And I think it's a really tough question, because at the end of the day, we have in Iran, we're dealing with an increasingly hardline government that does not seem to want to moderate in any manner. I think there was a window of opportunity, more than a decade ago, where there may have been some push and pull and some inklings for reform. That's really not the moment that we're in right now. And so I think what is incredibly important is for them to understand that this kind of behavior will not be normalized. I think one reason that there were so many women inside the country in Iran who were pushing for the Islamic Republic to be removed from the UN Commission on the Status of Women was that it was not merely symbolic. It was this idea that the Islamic Republic is using that UN platform as a place to put forward its idea that women simply belong in the domestic sphere and that that is the appropriate place for them. So it's actually about the normalization of that on a global level and for other countries to say, that's fine, we're going to let that happen, and we're not going to question it, or we're going to call it cultural relativism, that I think actually leads to it being much more accelerated of a problem. There of grassroots movements in the country. So back in the mid-2000s, there was something called the 1 Million Signatures campaign, and that was led by, it was a decentralized campaign led throughout the country where that was really trying to reform existing laws. And we see that reform can be incredibly difficult. I think what the young women in Iran have decided is that they're going to defy a lot of these laws. So even though the penalties are raising, even though there's surveillance technology being brought in from China that is now able to scale the kind of oppression and the monitoring of what people are wearing, there's still a lot of women who are living in open defiance of those laws. So I think a lot of what's going to make the change is actually about people in the country not complying with the enforcement of these laws. A lot of the laws seek to weaponize citizens in the surveillance of other citizens, and it's really going to be up to, I think, members of the population who've decided to take it into their own hands to not comply with these laws, push back on these laws, and defy these laws. I don't think we're going to see these kinds of reforms from the top down, unfortunately, because we've passed that moment, but we will see a pushback of the population against those very repressive laws that will either force the regime to make different choices or will eventually lead to a change of the guard.
Thank you very much. There is a question here, and I have a few questions online that we really hope that we can answer you, maybe online, but this question is really important. I apologize for the sound, but maybe we bear with us for this last question. Okay. All right, so hopefully everybody will go back quickly. I'm going to read this last question for those people who are telling me that I don't have any more time. Please give me a few more minutes. Ida Shams is asking, I often notice a conservative tone in statements from Western countries when they address gender apartheid in Iran and Afghanistan, as if these oppressive systems are somehow rooted in the culture and traditions of these nations. I'd like to know how the panelists feel about this perspective. So is it something cultural, and this is the traditions in these countries? Whoever who's up, please, who's willing to take this one.
I think I totally agree with the comments made. And I think that has been, that's how the international community works. That's how the international relationships between the states work. The states are always very cautious in how they talk to each other, how they address each other, because at the end of the day, what matters the most to each country, in the current international situation, is to keep diplomacy, to keep engagement, and to work for their own national interest. That is understandable, but very disappointing sometimes from the perspective of human rights. And I think that's what happens when it comes to gender apartheid and addressing regimes like Iran and Taliban relating to their atrocities.
Raihana Jan.
I personally think that it is not the culture of our countries, the apartheid. It is what the regimes, those who makes this apartheid, who commits this apartheid, it is their voice. They say that it is our national issue. It is what our people want. They want to normalize it. They want to keep it in that way, but it is not what people want. You saw Afghanistan women after the Taliban came, they really came to the streets, they protested, they raised their voices, but they have been arrested and tortured, and now they can do nothing because they have to pay for that. And it's why women inside Afghanistan, they are silent, but it is not what they want really.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's absolutely nobody's culture to be oppressed as a woman. This is certainly not our culture or our sisters in Afghanistan. It is not our traditions. Whoever who's saying this or trying to convey this is trying to just distract the international community's effort from what actually is needed to be done, which is confronting them and holding them into account for what they're doing. This time, for real, please join me to thank them, and thank you all for listening.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui kia koutou I hui mai nei, tēnei pō, ngā mihi nui kia koutou I tēnei te wiki o te reo Māori. Thank you all so much for coming tonight. It's been an incredibly moving evening, and thank you so much to our panellists both here and on Zoom for sharing your experiences and for being so candid about your own personal experiences. I know I can speak for everyone in the room that we have a huge amount of respect for your advocacy and the courage that you have had to share that with us, so thank you for doing that. I was at another event earlier today which Ingrid Leary mentioned when we were at the NZPPD event, and we covered some issues around Afghanistan, and one of the quotes that was used was that we must speak up for those who have no voice, and I thank all of you for those people who are unable to articulate the terrible feelings for them and frustrations about the restrictions on their rights. You have articulated those very well, and it's been heard by all of us here today. And I just wanted to also acknowledge, we had some of the MPs here earlier acknowledged, but also to acknowledge Sam Uffindale and Rima Nakle for joining us from the National Party. I think this is truly something that we need to address as a parliament, and so it's fantastic to have all of these different parties here represented. And while you were talking, I was thinking, you know, what can we do as parliamentarians to really move this issue forward and do what we can in New Zealand? We know there's restrictions on what we can do, and we know that this is truly a matter for the people in your country, and we heard of the resistance that's happening in Iran, particularly on this issue. But one thing I think we can do, and I would like the parliamentarians here to join me in this if possible, is to seek a meeting with our Minister of Foreign Affairs and discuss what we've learnt this evening, and to pass on the strong concerns we have around what's happening in relation to gender apartheid, and talk to him about what New Zealand can do as a country in order to move this issue forward. So I will put that invitation out, and hopefully my colleagues here will join me in asking for that meeting as well. So I just wanted to close by apologising for the bells. Those are just what we have in Parliament at this time of night, and by inviting all of you to take a leaflet as you leave. There's information on that around the Iran Solidarity Group social media, which you're all encouraged to follow, and also to leave a message in the album provided there in solidarity if you have time as well. Also, we will finish briefly with a karakia, but do we have a musical performance today? We do? Okay. So we'll see if that happens. But please stay for that, and then join us to continue to mix and mingle for the evening. But I'll just close with a karakia in te reo Māori. Whakataka te aho ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, kia hia ki ane te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei, mauri ora. Tēnā koutou katoa.
Sorry, before we lose the audience, there is a dance performance as the closing act. They will be dancing from there, and if you could please join the floor from that angle, because they're recording the performance. You may be able to see it from closer distance, and also the camera will capture the audience. Thank you.
که در خیلت به از ما کم نباشد. من از دست تو در عالم نهم روی، ولیکن چون تو در عالم نباشد. که در خیرت به از ما کم نباشد. من از دست تو در عالم نهم روی، ولیکن چون تو در عالم نباشد. تو با ناز به صد راز کنی اندر سرم صد قصه آغاز، کنی اندر سرم صد قصه آغاز. من آن مرغ من آن باز کنم من در هوایت بال و پرواز، کنم من در هوایت بال و پرواز. بیا بار سفر مندیم از این دشت، زمستون باز توی این خونه برگشت. بیا تا قصه ها گویم برایت که دوران جدایی دیر بگذشت. بیا بار سفر بندیم از این دشت، زمستون باز توی این خونه برگشت. بیا تا قصه ها گویم برایت